Welcome to the last session that we're going to do this year. That's not to say that we're not going to have sessions next year. In fact, I've got several in planning, but I'm going to space them out better for you. But this one is just intended for the people in the classes of the Tennessee Higher Education Innovation and Leadership Fellows and the UT Executive Leadership Institute. And I've asked David Mills and Lori Bruce to facilitate that. Lori, for those of you who have not had a chance to meet her, is the provost and the chief academic officer for Tennessee Tech University. And David is the director of the Health Sciences, Government Relations and Advocacy, and he is out of Memphis. And so with that, Lori, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you get us started and engage us in saying goodbye to 2020.
So I hope y'all can hear me, just right as you said. So Lori, my screen froze up and it says my internet connection is unstable. It never does that. It is 2020 after all.
Perfect, so, 2020.
Right on cue. I have a couple of slides I'm going to show, and one is a poll I'm going to take of you guys. Let's see if I can share. It says the host has disabled my screen sharing capabilities.
I will fix that for you. Wait a minute.
Angela, you volunteered IT support, right? You did. Good. Nod in your head. Absolutely. Cool. Just making sure.
Well, wait a minute. All right. I'm having a problem even finding where that happens.
Did you set this up? Is this part of the game?
When you click share screen at the bottom, Bob, you're presenting.
I've done it. Try it now, Lori.
Excellent. Excellent. Here we go. So I hope y'all can see that. This is my tagline for the week. I was quite proud of myself for coming up with this. Hindsight is 2020, and 2020 is almost in our hindsight. So, and I know many of us will probably be glad when, you know, not that everything's going to suddenly be better and different in 2021, but I don't think I've met a single person lately who wasn't excited about transitioning into 2021. So I have a little poll for us to do, and you can get to the poll two ways. If you prefer to go to just a website, that's there, or you can text. But there's a poll I want us to participate in just to kick it off. What one word would you use to describe 2020 in terms of your role in higher education, like in terms of your job? And if you have a hard time deciding what word to do, you can actually answer the question 3 times. You can do it up to 3 times. So make sure I activated. I can see as the words are coming in. I can't wait to show y'all this. I don't want to show it to you yet because I don't want to bias you. Because this is clearly a scientific poll. Can you guys see the word cloud that we created? I'll take a little screenshot of it, Bob, and send it once it finalizes.
That is really cool.
The bigger the word, the more people said that word. So obviously lots of people said challenging. Lots of us said stressful, communicate, innovative, adaptive, chaotic is pretty big. Has everybody had a chance to submit your word? I'm gonna lock it down so I can save it for us. So that's the word cloud that we have for 2020. I would love to know who said disruptive, because that was my word for 2020, disruptive. Who said, oh yeah.
I had that one.
So I thought this would help us kick off maybe a discussion of why that word, why did you choose the one word you chose to kind of describe 2020? You want to kick us off with disruptive?
Yeah. So, for us, we were undergoing some major planning processes just as COVID hit. Actually, we went through a strategic enrollment planning process. We had a meeting set up with all of academic administration set up to sort of start some prioritization discussions on what we wanted to do. And I'm sure Peter remembers this. Because we had all the cabinet, we had most of academic council there, 40 some people were supposed to be in that room. And as we were supposed to start, many of the cabinet members weren't there. And those that were there got up one at a time and left the room. Because, we'd been this year-long thing that was accumulating in this major event that had been on everyone's calendar for probably 9 months or more, suddenly gets cast aside because there are bigger things that are happening. And it sort of throws you off balance and trying to figure out, okay, how do we keep our momentum moving forward while dealing with this new enormous challenge that can't be ignored?
Who else wants to share why? I'm right now saving the word cloud so that I can put it in the chat. So I think it'll let me put it in the chat. I'm not sure, but I'll try.
I think I can go at a perspective. I guess initially on everything, I was so adamant that this was not to be a new normal for me, that trying to persist and still do some things programmatically and in and outside of the classroom in a manner that had some previous normalcy to it was absolutely possible, but exhausting. Seeming like, to do what we previously done, but now takes triple or quadruple the amount of effort and time. When you think about the other things to make it happen with distance and all these other things that go along with it. So exhausting. Trying to achieve that was, I think, a good descriptor for me. Glad that part's over, at least for a while.
I started out with challenging, but then I put in stressful because it's completely stressful. And then at the end, I thought, well, I've got one more. I better be positive about it. So I put in innovative. And actually, I think we have all had to become very innovative on how to get work done that we never thought that we could do with everybody, working from home. But it is possible as and what is it, the what's the necessary for invention? Invention is, I forget that phrase, but whatever that phrase is, that's what we had to do. Is just because we had to come up with new ideas, we did.
I'll jump in. My word was pivot. Pivot was just it. As soon as we got going on one thing, we thought we had this one conquered, and then pivot. Okay, here's another one. I almost felt like a bumper car. You know, you're going straight, and then all of a sudden, bam, you got to pivot this way. So it was just a series of pivot and communicate. Those were my two words: pivot and communicate.
I did find myself using the word pivot a lot in the last 9 months. You know, with our pivot to online, with our pivot to telecommuting, it was kind of a non-negative word that I could use to talk about disruption and change. So it became my favorite word over the last few months. Who put in there, I was looking, resilience?
I did, but I misspelled it the first time. But you know what I meant. And I think that, you know, as leaders, we all have to kind of pivot and stay strong and be resilient. And I think we all had challenging times, but if we just keep on persevere was the other word I was thinking about. Keep on persevering, I think the resilience builds up. So very much the word for me.
I would love to know who, and you can stay anonymous, but who put cleansing?
Me. And probably more a reflection of the personal, meaning that it kind of felt like that refining fire burning away a lot of the extraneous, and whether that is the daily commute or you know, buying shoes or whatever it may be, it has felt like kind of a reassertion of the things that I prioritize. So that's where the cleansing comes from.
I've also, I feel that way. Like our colors here at Tennessee Tech are purple and gold. And so I've told the faculty many times, you know, that I feel like we've been refined by fire, just like we earned our gold this year of our colors because, you know, we got refined by fire. And I actually think we're a much stronger university because of what we've experienced this year. We've proven to ourselves we can do a lot of things we didn't think we could do as a university. And I think that's been, I like the word cleansing because it's the way I feel too. Who else, anybody else want to jump in here?
So this is Angela Gibson from UTA. I think it was a very introspective looking year. We all, you know, started working from home. You know, like Lauren said, you know, you reassess what is really important to you. You know, is it having that other pair of shoes, or, you know, going shopping on the weekend, you know, all those things that you used to do. You know, as a female, I'm going to say, yeah, I enjoy a little retail therapy. But, you know, is that really what you need? I mean, do I really need it? And so what I noticed was, you know, when things were like new and no one knew much about the virus, we were kind of down in the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of need. Are we safe? Do we have what we need? Can I get it? Can I get to the grocery store and get chicken or beef or whatever it was, you know, to feed mouths in the house? And then, you know, you kind of work back up. And then, you know, I noticed especially some epiphany moments, you know, especially getting towards that, and I'm not going to say, Bob, that I stayed there very long, but I did feel like I reached the peak occasionally and had great moments of clarity. And I think that was from just removing all the junk that has filled up my life. So it's going to make me pickier about when things are a little bit like they used to be, about what I do with my time and my life.
Well, I can definitely agree. That is definitely true with my children. You know, a lot of the structured activities came to a complete halt. And so there was a lot more free time and free roaming of the neighborhood. And, you know, I think I'm going to question, as we kind of ease back into normal life, how much structured activity I'm going to allow to enter in to their schedules. Very, you know, more from a family perspective, but it's like being pickier about how much of that I let creep back in. Yeah. All right, I have a couple of other questions. I have one more question, and we won't do a word cloud with it, but I'm going to remind, I think, Jackie and Lauren, I'm going to remind y'all something I said, that man, have I eaten a lot of crow. You know, I think they know. Back in February, we had a meeting, the THEC Fellows at Southwest Tennessee Community College, and Dr. Hall, President Hall, was amazing. And she was sharing with us the crisis that community college was in when she came in as president, and how that gave her a clear mandate. And that community college changed so much and improved so much because it had to. And I remember distinctly saying that I feel like Tennessee Tech needed a crisis, needed a mandate. And I didn't want to wish on us a crisis, but we do everything pretty well, but we do it well enough that there's no mandate for change. There's nothing driving us toward change. And I remember saying, gosh, sometimes I'm a little jealous of universities that have a crisis. And I said that, I looked back, I said that on February 4th, I think it was. It was in early February that I said that. So be careful what you wish for. is my reason for sharing that. But I actually have a question, so we'll share my screen again. Anyone who would like to share something you now have as a challenge, but even better, an opportunity, that if someone had told you in January, you would have said, liar, there's no way that's going to happen. There's no way I'm going to have that as an opportunity or a challenge. Can anybody want to jump in and share? My opportunity was a crisis. I got a mandate, but wasn't the crisis. I certainly wouldn't wish it on myself again or on our university, but anybody else want to share?
I would have never guessed that all my staff could actually get through and do our financial statements with everyone working from home. We actually, you know, did all our schedules and our statements and worked with the auditors and made it through the process in the same amount of time. We might have even gotten through it quicker. So that just shocked me that we were able to do that. There was no way I ever thought, if you told me in January we could have done it without anybody being in the office, I said, there's no way.
I would say to that, Lori, the opportunity is just being a technology access ready college. Mm-hmm. I remember having multiple conversations with some of my directors who were reluctant to try to replicate services online. And like you said, the crisis created the opportunity for us to do that. And I was thinking about your first question. The word I used was whirlwind, and it redirected my attention to 4DX, right? Because this pandemic has created this whirlwind, but we still have to have our wildly important goals and stay focused. And so having that pivot, if you will, that opportunity to be more of an equity-minded culture, I think has been the other great thing. it pushed all of us to become even more equity minded.
Yeah, Lori, this is Bruce from the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. I would have never imagined that we would be able to increase the number of visitors that we've had, which turned into virtual visits from very important places in different federal agencies and companies, which has led to our best year ever in terms of research for the Department of Defense, for example. We usually host a lot of people on campus, but when we made this switch, we got more people involved, more proposals, and now more research funding because of it. So I would have never expected that when it first happened.
Yeah, this has been our best year in terms of faculty research proposal development. We've like doubled the proposals submitted this year compared to the past. And honestly, I've talked to a lot of faculty and had focus groups, and they said just being home, being home, and there was a benefit to having alone time and being home and not being in the office. They were able to focus on that part of their job more. And I think it was like a release for them. Like it was something to occupy them during shutdown periods. It helped them feel useful and productive. That's what they've shared with me. So I don't know if on your campus that's played into that too, in terms of having a really good year for research.
Yeah, I think it has. Great point.
One thing that happened for me at University of Tennessee at Martin is we've been very fortunate with THEC being able to propose state level funding not changing because of the pandemic, and with Petra and her group's very careful management, we were able to run searches still during the pandemic. And there are searches that historically have been very hard to find good candidates, but as the marketplace for faculty changed dramatically in the 1st of March, we've been able to bring some really good people here, and they love it. But the reality is, during a normal year, I'm not sure we get all those candidates to even be willing to come and look at Martin. And so, that's an opportunity that we've had that, in all honesty, the pandemic and THEC being able to work so hard with the state legislature to not change the state funding has really helped us and will serve us well for the next decade.
On the Knoxville campus, I'm in advancement alumni development, and we have been able to engage more alumni, not only across the state and country, but globally. We've done already one virtual town hall in Asia, and we have one for Europe and one for Middle East lined up for next spring. And I travel to Asia once a year typically, and I can't see the number of people we've now touched through that means. And then from a fundraising standpoint, we're having a really great year because I think people have gotten used to the relationship across Zoom and the good old-fashioned phone call where we used to have to travel across the country now. So our numbers are up in both areas and having a fantastic year, a lot like Bruce was talking about. So we feel pretty fortunate. That's the positive that's come out of this.
Yeah, that ability to reach out and touch more people was not something that obviously I would have foreseen. This is very anecdotal, but I still give research lectures, and normally I go to Asia once or twice a year to give a lecture. I'll be invited by a university or something to give a seminar or a plenary at the beginning of a conference. And I gave one earlier this year. It had 17,000 attendees. Probably more people than attended one of my talks, like all together for the previous 3 years, at least. And that was one talk. And it blew my mind, that I think with that, there weren't as many conferences to go to, there weren't as many opportunities. And so the novelty also of listening to that online and it being virtual and everything. But But yeah, I mean, the ability to reach a lot of people that normally in normal times would not do a virtual activity. I don't think they would normally. Anybody else? Before I hand it off to David, I'm going to hand it off to him. We're going to tag team.
One thing I want to mention here, this is Dan Harder from Health Science Center. As an IT leader, you hear all these things. And so the opportunity for us is to refocus our technology platforms to meet all these needs. So everyone now wants to use Zoom or WebEx or Teams. Steve, you're just talking about, the advancement piece, we have technology platforms behind that. We talk about research, you have technology platforms behind that to help your investigators and faculty do their research. And so I think it's a interesting, fun, stressful time for technology leaders. And I'll just mention this because unfortunately I have to go, and there's a bunch of leaders on here. Make sure as you continue to pivot here, you continue to invest in technology, because none of this is free. So we have CARES Act funding right now, but I would just say everyone comes to technology for everything. And so to focus, fund it right, to keep doing these outcomes is, I think, so important right now. That's all I'll say.
I'll second that.
Hey, our person over all of ITS here, I told her, I said, you've never probably felt more loved and more attention. She's like, enough attention already. All right, I'm going to hand it over to David.
Can you hear me?
Whoop, whoop, whoop. I'm still sharing, sorry.
That's okay. Can everybody hear me? So Dr. Bruce, thank you for your leadership and for engaging us to begin this conversation about what I would call the being caught between history and destiny. Because every crisis has its challenge and its opportunity. The challenge is to know how to adequately respond, not to over-respond or to over-react, but to respond with some thought, to be rational, and not be overwhelmed just by the temper of the times. And the opportunity, of course, is to recognize that in the midst of a trial or test or tribulation, there is always extraordinary opportunity, every single time, and every time in history. And so there were two things I wanted to ask you to think about today. Everybody familiar with Robinson Crusoe? William Defoe? Do you know he wrote another book called A Journal of the Plague Year? Everybody know that? So he did another book in 1722 about the bubonic plague. The parallels between then and now are precisely the same. Precisely the same, 300 years later. And so here we are in the 21st century trying to make sense of this. And I want to sort of lay this out as a football field, if you will, if you'll give me a minute to make this analogy for this conversation. In December, and most of you know, my wife is the leader of the health department in Shelby County. So she saw the first reports coming out of China in December. And in January, she issued a travel advisory from the health department. So I'm going to put that as one piece of this puzzle. At the other end of the field, again, these are two touchdown zones, if you will, on a football field. The other end of the field, what happened for me in May, because Dr. Bob, I had 7 of my grandchildren here, and I'm just having the time of my life. And one of my sons called me from another part of the world and said, have you seen the news? And I said, the news? Of course not. I've been having a good time. I've been having fun. And he made me cut on the news. He said, the Nashville courthouse is on fire. And I said, what? And I just couldn't believe it. My mind just said, wait a minute. No. This is not making sense to me. So those are the two end zones here that I want to frame our conversation for the rest of this journey. This is an exciting time for me. And Dr. Bruce, I didn't write anything in because I wanted to save it for this segment. This is a terribly exciting time for me. And it's exciting because what a crisis does is it forces people to seek clarity. We tend to maximize the external and minimize the internal. That's just a human tendency. That's what we do. We tend to be so outward focused, we don't look at the inward. And then the final piece in this is midfield, at the 50-yard line. Do you know that the economic data that is coming out, you know, my wife saw it first, where in one of the municipalities in Shelby County, we were trying to look at the economic impact of the virus. And one of the mayors said, no, my revenues are up so crazy, I really don't know what's going on. We haven't figured out what's happening, but my revenues are through the roof. And then I just got a report from the governor's office that Tennessee's revenues are up 2% over last year. So this is pre-COVID. I need you to stop and think about that. What does that mean to you if I put that out there just like that? What does that mean to you when your revenues statewide are above where they were a year ago prior to the pandemic? What is that telling you? I want you to think about that and talk to me about it. What does that mean to you? That you're doing better economically on the revenue side than you were a year ago.
David, I think we have new industries that there's just this huge shift in what people are spending their money on, and a ton of online shopping and pickup shopping that is happening that just never happened before.
Okay.
David, I'll jump in, and from the municipal standpoint, Tennessee is very much a sales tax state, and up until last year, internet sales was not taxed, and that's been a change in the taxing structure. So that's a large part of it.
Okay, great point, Margaret.
I'll follow your analogy and say less lateral motion and more forward progress.
Say that one more time.
Less lateral motion and more forward progress.
Okay, great. Anybody else?
No, I find it interesting when I just talk to my neighbors. I walk my neighborhood, and so I have a lot of neighbors just that work in all different industry sectors. And without fail, every single one of them said, I'm busier than I've ever been. Right? They could be in insurance sales, they could be software developers, people who work in the financial industry. And they said, you know, yeah, I'm at home, I'm working from home, but not just me, my entire team, we are busier than we've ever been. And when I talk to them about why that is, why do you think that is? And almost without fail, they say, because we had to reinvent our business. We had to learn to do our business differently. And that means investing in our business. And I think that's what, when I hear Lauren say forward movement and forward motion instead of lateral movement, is that, you know, their industry had to move forward, in order to survive, had to move forward. And that meant doing it differently than they've ever done before, which means investing in their industry. And so I just found it interesting. Every single neighbor tells me they're busier than they've ever been.
So I just want to throw in here that there's been an exodus from the big cities where rent is really high into 3 states, Tennessee and Texas being 2 of those. And I can't remember the third one off the top of my head, because we don't have income tax. So with people being able to work remotely, houses are just being snapped up left and right in our areas. The word's out on the street that Knoxville's a great place to live. And I'm sure Nashville Nashville had a housing boom for a long time before Knoxville. So with the housing boom, then you've got durable goods sales. So people have to go buy their new washer, dryer, their refrigerator, and all that stuff's on back order. Plus we also have vehicles that used car sales have actually gone up in price because they are in shorter supply. So there's several things that are going on economically that have never happened before.
So what does that tell us about crisis? What does that tell us about the challenge? What does that tell us about the opportunity? What does that tell us about, I mean, my daughter's in New York. 400,000 people have already left New York.
There was already an exodus coming out of the Northeast, and it just accelerated it.
So this shift, Angela, I'm going to go back to the word that you used at the beginning of your remarks. The shift that's happening in American life, and it's not just in American life, the impact is pretty phenomenal globally. There are people in other parts of the world who are in the pits because Americans are not coming to visit their countries. I can tell you that their economies are suffering because we, as Americans, are not doing what we have normally done as a very, very mobile people. So their economies are in the pit because we are not engaged as we have historically been engaged. And you talked about the shift in where people are choosing to live. How do we respond to that challenge? Let me ask you individually, not related to your institution, not related to your profession, but just as a human being. What does that mean? What does that mean for our culture? What does that mean for how we relate to each other? And the tension that's always been at the root of creativity and productivity.
I'll jump in and say one of the things that I've been concerned about as I've seen so many new opportunities is the lack of the unscheduled interaction with people that I don't normally run into. And some of you on this call might know this. I know I've had a conversation with one member of our group. My wife moved to Martin. She finished her job in Mississippi and moved to Martin the first week of March. You want to talk about the absolute worst time to move to a new community where you know absolutely no one? So she has been here since March. She still has a very limited social network. You know, it's still not exactly safe to go out in public here. And so, you know, I have a front row seat to seeing one of the worst case scenarios, I would say. But I think of my own work, you know, some of the accomplishments that I'm seeing professionally happen for me and for my college have come from those spontaneous conversations in the hallway that we never intended to have. You know, I've got a picture of this building that Bob has so much helped us build behind me. The webcam that we put on it to track the progress of that happened because of a conversation in the hallway while we were busy doing something else. And how many of those ideas are we losing right now because we don't have that cross-pollination with each other that happens in the day-to-day life? Because, you know, I love these kinds of opportunities, but this was scheduled, it was put on my calendar, we had a task, that's what got us together. There's not always these opportunities to have just those random moments of thought, encouraging each other to, oh, have you thought of this? Oh, I've been working on this for months and I hadn't told anyone. Those kinds of things. And I miss that, and I'm afraid that we're losing something because of it.
I will say that it's difficult for me to create new challenges for my employees. But it's easy to continue to do what you already know how to do, but to cross-train and to give special projects, you know, new projects where people would have to get together and get trained. I've just put that off till we can come back into the office. I don't know if that's a limitation on my creativity. We do some Zooms, but it's just certain things you can only, seems to me that you can only do well in the office.
Anybody else?
Kind of in the same vein as both Shadow and Mary is that when I would have staff meetings, this is how I run staff meetings in my office. We have a big magnet board and we have magnets on there for all the different tasks and initiatives and things we're doing. And we get around it and we talk about that. And so we don't, it's not like each person goes around and does a report out of what they're done or what they're achieving. We talk about things in terms of projects, not but it's color coded, you know, like I'm green and someone else is purple. And so you can kind of see who's working on what and how we're making progress. And I make it like there's a finish line. And when we pass that magnet across the finish line, we all cheer and, you know, okay, we can move on to a new project, a new initiative. I miss that. Like, I feel like there was a lot of energy that we got out of those kinds of activities. And people would be like inspired to just go the extra mile that week to push their project across the finish line and do things. So I feel like that the energy level is very different in this environment, in this work environment. And I miss that. Maybe I'm more of a people person than I think I am, but I miss that group dynamic of kind of cheering each other on. But one good thing is I've noticed when I meet with groups in this type of meeting, sometimes people that would not normally speak up in person, they get called on more. I think when the person who's facilitating the group does it well, I think we hear more voices than we would normally when everybody's just in a room, because typically someone tends to dominate it when you're in a room, where I feel like in this environment, it's easier to facilitate and draw people out so that everybody contributes to the conversation.
And so how would you define that element in this equation? In other words, the normal social interaction that facilitates the kind of conversation you've referenced, are you suggesting that it's broadened because we're not in the same room? Is it a function of just an individual's personality? Is it a function of the setting? Is it what is that a function of? Is it a function of, you know, I'm reminded of Lauren's comment about cleansing and how the clarity of a moment can force you to move things out the way so that you can see it clearer, or release or cut loose some of the inhibitions that allow you to speak or say what you're thinking or feeling.
I think my comment about getting everybody involved in the conversation, I think it's more structural. That, you know, when I look at my screen, everybody's on an even playing field. You know, someone's physical presence doesn't take up more, that dynamic of someone who really leans into the table, so you tend to call on them or you tend to engage with them more. I feel like this can be very flat and low energy, but at the same time, it can create a lot of balance amongst personalities. And so, I don't know if I'm making sense, but that's one thing I've noticed a big difference in just the way in terms of group activities and group meetings and discussions. I know that's a little bit off your original question, but.
It's okay, it's all good. It's all good.
And to Lori's point, I think if you think of those individuals who, you know, will jump in and sort of talk over people until they're given the floor, it is much more obvious in this dynamic that you're doing that. And I think it gives people pause. I mean, how many of us probably are scanning the screen to look to see if somebody's gone off mute before we say something, right? Because there is that different dynamic. I think it helps people to be more respectful of each other's voices.
You know, we go back to the conversations in the hall that we're missing. So, you know, and those are great conversations to have, and you can get a lot of stuff done. So now that we're at home or in our office, but really not seeing people, we have to be really intentional about reaching out to people, you know, and making the time to do that with the whirlwind gets a little bit harder, because there's several people on here I go, yeah, I've been meaning to reach out to them for 2 weeks or 3 weeks and I just haven't done it yet, but I mean to. So for all of y'all, I'm really well intentioned.
So I want to take a minute to try to take what I would call what I'll call it the George Floyd phenomenon, because I've never in my wildest dreams thought that I would experience what we experienced as a society and are still going through even as we speak. And I heard an observer from England who said, we're witnessing the decline of our country. And I'm gonna say that to you one more time. Somebody who's looking at us is saying, you're seeing an America in decline. And you know, people hear this stuff. People say these things about who we are and what we aspire to be. Universities are these fabulous places that facilitate the interface and interaction between folk from all over the world. And I can tell you, it's been the finest experience of my life. I mean, it's wonderful to have a place where you can come and engage each other. And much of the tension that has historically defined civilization is out of that setting. It only emerges occasionally when there's a boiling point, or when there's some factor or element that facilitates bringing things to the surface. And for those of us who are already learned, we know those elements exist. In fact, part of the university's job is to try to make sure that those things don't necessarily destroy the character of the institution. That's part of what we do as people at universities. And so I'm curious to get your sense about the things that we're seeing in the culture around our country, and how do you think they will impact the future of higher education?
I certainly think there's going to be some backlash in the sense that it may be anecdotal, but it seems to me what I hear is that the very liberal educators in universities have changed the perceptions of the younger generation versus the older generation. And it seems to me that there is a greater divide between people my age and people in college. And, you know, I just don't know. And it just seems like it's a real negative, instead of where we think a lot of times of the people in college and in their 20s are innovative and have a lot of energy. Now it seems that there's a division between those that are having these new ideas that are very different from the people who, you know, have had long careers and are older.
So I have an opposing view. So as we go back to the Civil War and to some of the history that's really not taught or very glossed over, you know, we have the Reconstruction period where Southern states didn't have, they weren't allowed to form their own governments until they met certain goals. And so if I look at that and I see, you know, there was Lincoln who freed people. There was Johnson, who was very much a Southern sympathizer. And then you have U.S. Grant as being the 18th president, who was very much cared about how Reconstruction happened and the violence that was going on in the South at the time. You know, I see a lot of parallels to the period that we just went through.
Wow.
So, and then I think about pop songs that were written in the 60s by David Bowie, you know, with the, you know, saying, hey, those kids that you're spitting on for rioting and saying that, you know, the war's not fair, you know, I think it's always been there. It's just whether or not you're paying attention to it.
I certainly don't feel qualified to speak for all of higher ed, but for Tennessee Tech, this year, I love alliterations. We were torn apart by tornadoes. We had tornadoes hit right near campus, killed 19 people. We were pounded by a pandemic. We were exhausted by an election year. But I feel like for my campus, we were awakened by social unrest. There were a lot of people on my campus who still don't fully understand, but some real honest, heartfelt conversations happen on my campus at all levels of people who normally would not engage in conversations about social injustice, institutional racism. It wasn't that they denied that, it just wasn't on their radar because it wasn't directly impacting them. And there was an awakening on my campus, I believe, at many different levels because of the conversations that happened. One-on-one conversations.
So, you know, the reason I tried to say this is between history and destiny is because the search for truth has always been at the heart of a university's mission. It is about the discoveries that come from that search of truth. I mean, science, you know, even today we have people questioning whether science ought to do what science does. And so it's not just about the social unrest. It is about the foundations of our institutions. And that's the real question that I want us to really think about, because we have this opportunity to do it in a very secure place. But that's the central issue, is whether or not our institutions can withstand the challenges that are emerging in a time when the technological innovations can make truth appear to be something it's not, and to make deceit appear to be something it's not. And so trying to sift all of that out, to me, is what the role of a university, that is the role of a university, to help us learn how to critically think and challenge each other, but do it with some integrity so that we're not trying to tear each other down in the process. That when we finish, we walk away with our integrity. And nobody's sense of loss, nobody's got a sense of gain. It is about the sharing that happens between us as human beings. And if that doesn't define the character of our institutions, if we allow something that's masquerading as truth that may not be true, or something that's not true masquerading as truth, I think that's the university's job, is to ferret out that truth, to help people know how to ferret out that truth. Because at the end of the day, all of us are individuals. We'll go back home to our families, to our friends, to people who love us in our institutions, in places where we go to fellowship, whether that's at church or some social gathering. We all have these networks, and that's what's one of the defining elements of what America is. And it is that we can come to the university so that we can search out and seek out that which defines us as individuals. And then that contributes to the character of our institutions. And I know, Dr. Bob, I don't have all day to talk, and I'm sorry if I've taken up too much time, but you know, higher education is such a special place for me. It's a really, you know, I'm a preacher's child. And so for me, it's like, you know, this is the great place where the stuff that the Pope and the church won't even talk about, they just won't. It's just hard for them to talk about it. But for higher education, it is a magnificent place for our kids to be able to come, as I did at the University of Tennessee 40 years ago. To try to discover, you know, what makes me who I am, what makes our country what it is, and what has helped us meet each challenge of our destiny and our history. And Angela, I do want to end on this note, because you said it, and I think you said it well. Because in the middle of that war, we were trying to figure out how to forge a new nation, literally. Literally. On the one hand was a lot of death and suffering, And we had a depression right around the corner, the Panic of 1873. And the country was laid waste. It was horrendous. And there were people who couldn't see their way. And here we are 150 years later. And guess what? We didn't just meet that challenge. We met every other challenge this country has ever faced. Every one of them. That's in no small part to people who are educated, who are knowledgeable, who have faith, who work, who have integrity, listen, have wisdom, can agree without being, or disagree without being disagreeable, who will turn to each other and not on each other, who will talk with each other and not at each other. That's going to be the challenge of this next generation, is knowing how to do that with some civility. Because I'm looking at news every day about people fighting in the streets, killing each other, stabbing each other. I'm looking at leaders. I mean, I mentioned William Defoe for that reason. It's the same stuff 300 years later. Nothing's changed. And we can meet these challenges.
Well, this may be a forced segue to that point, David, but what I'd like to end with is give each of you, if you want, an opportunity to tell us, or even tell yourself, what happened this year that you are taking into 2021 that you're going to be doing differently? So what did you pick up from the experience of 2020 that you're resolved in 2021 you're going to deal with differently?
Bob, I'll start by saying that I'm committed to more paperless transactions and doing things electronically and supporting the ability to do things remotely. I think that's helped our organization to continue to thrive by figuring it out and adapting. And I keep telling my team to have the lemonade from the lemons.
Well, I can see from your new office that you also have picked up a much better place to be than.
Yes, yes, I'm in the library in the University of Washington.
Others.
Bob, I'll share that I'm in the process right now of trying to shift from performance measures based on outputs to outcomes, as employees are working remotely, and we're already in the process of transitioning to a work from home strategy. So what you did 1, 2, and 3, what was the outcome of that? So we're making a shift, and that's going to carry us forward well beyond just 21.
I'll share. I'm anybody who knows me, I'm a very task-oriented person, right? I have goals, we have initiatives. It's about the impact, it's about the outcome. But as soon as we left for spring break and said we're not coming back immediately, and we knew the pandemic was well and truly upon us, I made a commitment to myself to check on each of my deans, each of my direct reports, personally, not for a project, not to see how a task is coming along, but to just check on them as people. Are they okay? What do they need? And it really changed the dynamic of some of my working relationships with some of my deans. And so that's something that I feel like I did it enough. It's now a habit that I have formed. And so just on a regular basis, just checking on people And it doesn't have to be about a project or a task, but letting them know that I just care about them as a person.
For me, um, it's broadened my perspective on remote work, and some right now I'm creating and trying to develop some things to help managers assess their workforce to see that, help them see that remote work will become a best practice for us for a long-term basis. So I've been working on developing some things with a team of people. Also, I see that we've had a lot of committees for almost anything you can dream about. And it seems like I spend sometimes a whole week just doing committee work. But I think that has helped our teams grow closer together and focus on relying on each other and not being so much of a silo in terms of how we operate and work together better. And it's helping us define the culture of our university. It's shifting. It's not what it used to be. And so I think it's made us more aware of things just in general. And I'm going to focus and take that to greater lengths. And like Lori was saying, that I'm going to really focus on listening to people more, not necessarily checking with them, but people have a whole lot of issues that they've gone through. Their productivity may have gone up or it's declined, but what can we do to help them succeed?
Well, Lori, David, any final words from the two of you, and then we'll wrap up?
One, I'm just thankful for this opportunity. There's nothing quite like this fellowship, and I want to make sure I tell you, thank you for pulling us together so that we can talk with each other.
I would just say ditto. Thank you, Bob. Thank you for facilitating us, and Lauren, facilitating us, helping us stay glued together as a group. Some of my THEC fellows are people I call on and, hey, I'm facing this, or this seems like an opportunity. What do you think? Is it, what are the traps here? And so I have really, really relished the relationship I've built with a lot of the fellows in this program. So thank you.
Well, and part of this experience is to introduce you to the other groups. And there are a total of 50 of us that have had this common experience at this point. And hopefully we'll add 50 more and continue the power of the network. Well, thank you. Lauren, you suddenly jumped into the screen, so
well, this is a little bit different mix of a group that I anticipated, but I did want to share my own pivot leaving 2020. So I am actually moving into a new phase in 2021, which means I'm leaving THEC. But I will be moving into consulting and coaching moving forward. So I wish more of my fellows were on here for me to share, but I certainly credit the fellows program with a lot of these opportunities because I have been learning alongside all of you. This is my first exposure to coaching, and I have undergone my own training and will be pursuing my certification. And then a lot of the innovative, the agile approaches, the lean budgeting, those things that we've started to talk about are things that I'm now learning how to bridge between consulting and higher ed. So I hope you will all stay in touch, and I will send out a follow-up with my contact information and everything. So it has been a pleasure, and I have enjoyed your thought partnership, your inspiration, and just your shared learning with me. So thank you.
Well, and I would add that to everybody in the group that, Lauren, it's been wonderful partnering with you on this program. And none of you know the number of hours that Lauren and I have spent, not just in the development of the program, but also having long extended conversations about what we're trying to do here. And you've been great to work with and invaluable. And you're going to be very much missed. So we'll figure out a way to keep you involved. And I suppose
Honorary.
if some of you have seen this,
I will also
Lauren,
say that if you want to send recommendations for coachees, either of members of your own team or colleagues, please do.